Cannibalism, one of the most unsettling and taboo aspects of human behavior, has appeared throughout history in a variety of contexts, from acts of desperation in extreme survival situations to calculated murders by individuals driven by darker motives. In this video, we delve into 10 real-life cases that demonstrate how cannibalism has occurred in the modern era and historical records, each with its own shocking and bizarre story. Whether fueled by psychological disorders, cultural practices, or sheer survival, these accounts offer a haunting glimpse into the extremes of human nature. We'll explore cases like the Soviet serial killer Andrei Chikatilo, whose decade-long spree of murder and mutilation left a scar on Russia, and Armin Meiwes, a German man who achieved infamy for engaging in consensual cannibalism, a crime fully documented on video. We'll also look at survival cases such as the tragic Donner Party, stranded in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and the notorious World War II accounts of Japanese soldiers resorting to the most desperate of measures. From twisted rituals of power to acts of sheer terror, these stories expose the darkest side of the human condition. Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov. In the shadow of post-Soviet Russia, Andrei Chikatilo's reign of terror spanned over a decade. Between 1978 and 1990, Chikatilo claimed the lives of at least 56 people, many of them women and children, with acts of extreme violence. His method was always the same. He lured his victims to remote locations, where he would assault, murder, and mutilate them. What set Chikatilo apart from other serial killers was the grotesque nature of his crimes. He often disemboweled his victims, removing internal organs including the uterus and nipples from women. He later admitted to biting into the bodies and tasting flesh, though he stopped short of fully confessing to cannibalism. Chikatilo's violent outbursts were driven by a deeply embedded sexual frustration. Despite being married, he was largely impotent, and his crimes were a warped manifestation of his suppressed desires. His trial, one of the most infamous in Russian history, revealed that he relished the power he felt in taking lives, seeing it as a way to control his victims and feed his insatiable bloodlust. When authorities captured Chikatilo in 1990, they faced a man devoid of remorse. In 1994, after a trial where he barely acknowledged his heinous acts, Chikatilo was executed by a single gunshot to the head. Two Dutch TV hosts eating for the cameras. In 2011, two Dutch television hosts, Dennis Storm and Valerio Zeno, took reality TV to a horrifying extreme. As part of their show Proof Koninen, translated as guinea pigs, they agreed to have small pieces of their own muscle surgically removed, cooked, and served. The body parts in question, Zeno's buttocks and Storm's abdomen, broadcast on national television, the two ate each other's flesh as part of an episode that aimed to explore bizarre scientific curiosities. While the legality and ethics of the stunt were hotly debated, the broadcast served as a startling reminder of how far reality TV will go for shock value. The pair downplayed the event afterward, treating it as a curiosity rather than a grotesque act. Despite public backlash, they avoided serious legal repercussions, since Dutch law does not explicitly prohibit cannibalism. The spectacle raised questions about media ethics, human dignity, and the lengths to which entertainment will go to captivate audiences. Ratu Urde, the most prolific cannibal in history. In 19th century Fiji, Ratu Urde, a powerful chieftain, earned infamy not just for his leadership, but for his practice of cannibalism. According to historical records, Ratu Urde consumed between 872 and 999 people during his lifetime, securing his place in the Guinness World Records as the most prolific cannibal in documented history. Cannibalism in Fiji at the time was not merely a survival mechanism. It was deeply embedded in the culture as a way to display power and dominance over enemies. Urde's consumption of human flesh was a form of ritual, part of warfare and political control. Victims, often captured in battle, were sacrificed in elaborate ceremonies where their flesh was eaten by the chieftain and his warriors. Despite the horror that modern eyes cast upon such acts, within Fijian society at the time, it was a gruesome affirmation of power. The practice faded as Western influence and Christianity spread throughout the Pacific Islands in the late 19th century, but Urde's legacy as one of history's most prolific cannibals endures. Issei Sagawa, the cannibal who walked free. Issei Sagawa's crime shocked the world not only for its brutality, but for its bizarre aftermath. In 1981, Sagawa, a Japanese student in Paris, invited his classmate René Hartevelt to his apartment under the pretext of studying. Once there, Sagawa shot her in the neck, killed her, and began a grotesque feast. Over the next few days, Sagawa dismembered her body, eating parts of her flesh, storing others in his refrigerator. His justification? He believed that by consuming her, he could absorb her beauty and vitality. French police arrested him as he attempted to dump her body in a park, and Sagawa immediately confessed. However, after being declared legally insane, Sagawa was extradited to Japan. To the disbelief of many, Japanese authorities failed to pursue charges due to a legal technicality, and Sagawa was released, walking free despite his confession. He later capitalized on his infamy, publishing books, giving interviews, and even appearing on talk shows. Despite his grotesque crime, Sagawa became a perverse celebrity, a free man living off the notoriety of his own cannibalism. Tamara Samsonova, the Granny Ripper. In 2015, Russian police arrested Tamara Samsonova, a 68-year-old grandmother, for the murder and dismemberment of her friend Valentina Ulanova. When they delved deeper into her past, they discovered that Samsonova had been living a secret life as a serial killer. Over the course of 2 decades, she had murdered and dismembered at least 11 victims, including her husband, whose body has never been found. What truly horrified investigators was Samsonova's casual attitude toward her crimes. She meticulously documented her killings in a diary, detailing how she lured victims, drugged them, and dismembered their bodies, even reportedly eating parts of her victims. Her calm demeanor during police interrogations, coupled with her frail appearance, made her crimes even more shocking. Samsonova's acts were reminiscent of Soviet serial killer Andrei Chikatilo, but her methodical approach and lack of remorse made her one of Russia's most terrifying criminals. Regina v. Dudley and Stevens, Cannibalism on the High Seas. The case of Regina v. Dudley and Stevens set a legal precedent regarding the limits of necessity as a defense for murder. In 1884, 4 British sailors were stranded in the South Atlantic Ocean after their yacht was wrecked. For weeks, they drifted without food or fresh water, slowly succumbing to starvation. After nearly 20 days, the captain, Thomas Dudley, and his mate, Edwin Stevens, decided to sacrifice the youngest among them, a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. Parker was already gravely ill from dehydration, so the 2 men killed him and consumed his flesh to survive. When they were rescued days later, the men admitted their actions, but their defense of necessity was rejected in court. Both were convicted of murder and sentenced to death, though their sentences were later commuted to 6 months in prison. The case remains a landmark in British legal history, a stark exploration of the morality of survival cannibalism. The Donner Party, survival at any cost. In 1846, a group of American pioneers set out for California, eager to begin new lives. However, a series of poor decisions and harsh weather trapped the group, known as the Donner Party, in the Sierra Nevada mountains. As the snow piled up and food supplies ran out, desperation set in. The survivors faced a horrifying choice: starve or turn to cannibalism. What followed was one of the most infamous tales of survival in American history. The bodies of those who had died from starvation or exposure became the only source of food for the remaining members of the group. By the time rescuers arrived, nearly half of the 87 pioneers had died, and evidence of cannibalism was undeniable. Though it was an act of survival, the moral implications of their choices continue to haunt the legacy of the Donner Party. The Chowchilla Cannibals, a desperate famine in China. During a devastating famine in the 19th century, the village of Chowchilla in northern China was plunged into unimaginable desperation. With no food and little hope, the starving residents resorted to a grim solution. They began consuming the bodies of those who had died from starvation or illness. As the famine worsened, even the corpses of family members were not spared. Accounts from the time describe a village consumed by hunger, where cannibalism became a horrific last resort for survival. The practice, though born out of extreme necessity, left an indelible mark on the history of the region, a grim testament to the lengths people will go when pushed to the brink. World War II Japanese soldiers, cannibalism as torture. During World War II, reports surfaced of Japanese soldiers in the Pacific practicing cannibalism, not as an act of survival, but as a method of terror. Victims, often prisoners of war, were brutally tortured and sometimes consumed while still alive. Survivors recounted horrific scenes where their fellow soldiers were mutilated and eaten by their captors, often as a display of dominance. The psychological impact on the victims and witnesses was profound, with some describing the cannibalism as the ultimate act of dehumanization. The soldiers involved were often malnourished themselves, but the act of consuming prisoners appeared to serve more as a method of asserting control than addressing hunger. Armin Meiwes, the internet cannibal. In 2001, a chilling online exchange led to one of the most bizarre cases of consensual cannibalism in modern history. Armin Meiwes, a German computer technician, posted an advertisement on a cannibalism-themed internet forum looking for someone willing to be killed and eaten. Shockingly, a man named Bernd Brandes, an engineer from Berlin, responded, agreeing to be the victim in this grotesque pact. On March 9, 2001, the two men met at Meiwes' home in Rothenburg, Germany. What followed was a horrific series of events that Meiwes meticulously documented on videotape. Brandes voluntarily allowed Meiwes to amputate part of his body, which they both attempted to eat. Over the next several hours, as Brandes slowly bled out, Meiwes killed him with his consent, then dismembered the body. Meiwes stored portions of Brandes' flesh in his freezer and consumed them over the following months, reportedly with a sense of fulfillment. The crime was uncovered when Meiwes sought a second victim online, which led to his arrest in December 2002. The trial raised unprecedented legal and ethical questions. Although Brandes had consented to his death, cannibalism was not explicitly illegal under German law at the time. Meiwes was initially sentenced to 8.5 years for manslaughter, but after public outcry, the case was retried, and he received a life sentence in 2006 for murder. Meiwes' case remains one of the most disturbing examples of consensual cannibalism, and is a stark example of how the internet can foster the darkest of human impulses. Conclusion: these stories reveal a disturbing reality. Cannibalism, though rare, has surfaced in many parts of the world, driven by diverse motivations such as survival, mental illness, or ritualistic power dynamics. From the serial killings of Andrei Chikatilo in Soviet Russia to the bizarre televised stunt in the Netherlands, each case reflects different facets of this horrific act. While some instances were born of extreme circumstances like famine and survival, others came from a place of deep psychological disturbance or cultural practices. These 10 cases serve as grim reminders of the depths to which human behavior can descend, challenging our understanding of morality, law, and the capacity for violence. Whether through legal consequences, societal repercussions, or the lasting impact on those affected, the shadows cast by these events linger long after the headlines fade. In studying these stories, we confront not only the acts themselves, but also the psychological and societal forces that allow such horrors to occur. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.